It looks like it's recording. My name is Emi Kimura. I'm an extension agronomist located in Vernon. I started my position in 2015 April, so almost 2 years, 3 years in April. But today I will talk about sins of overgrazing, and this title I got this title from my PhD advisor in Washington State University. He is a forage state specialist in Washington State, but he hated to see overgrazed pasture, and that's how I got this presentation kind of set up for people in mainly maybe in Texas, maybe other states too. Um, so we will, oops, start with this photos. Have you seen pastures like this? It's overgrazed and very short. You can see through everything. Oops. Okay. This one is even worse. That you have a lot of bare grounds and some weeds started to infestate. Uh, Maybe there are less green matter compared to the brown soils. That's really in bad shape. And this is the Bermuda grass field that got hit by drought. And plus, I believe it was overgrazed. Bermuda grass has a nice good root system that is resilient to dry conditions or stressed condition, but if you overgraze and it has shallow root system, any kind of stressful environment will damage the pasture pretty badly. So I'll do several multiple questions with you, pop-up quiz for you today. And thank you. And if you can participate to that question, that'll be great. If you can vote, if you have a computer or a smartphone, I think you can participate and answer the question. I'll read it through. But so what's the major benefit from overgrazed pasture? First one is easy inspection of soil texture by touching the surface. The second one is a fire protection. Third is less likely to lose golf balls when practicing your game. Fourth one is always have a ball field ready for weekend fun and games. And last one is none of the above. some of you, some of you are having fun in the overgrazed pasture. 12.5%, 1%. And most of you got it right. None of the above. Nothing listed in here is a true benefit of overgrazed pasture. Second question, overgrazed pastures struggle from hot, dry summers, B, cold, wet winters, cold spring soils with slow nutrient release, cooling fall soils where nutrient release is fast and high losses. All of the above. Good. That's all of the above. Overgrazed pasture can struggle with so many different environmental factors such as cold winters, even hot summers. We will talk more about how they get suffered in later slides. We'll go on to the next question. The bladeless appearance from overgrazed pasture should not deter continuation of the same, save you money on fertilizer and seed, gives you daily exercise feeding, hey, easy monitoring of food health, and all of the above and dozen more. You all are a very good student. Okay. Some of you enjoy exercising feeding hay. And all of the above and dozen more. So many negatives that associated with overgrazed pasture. And next question, recover from overgrazing could include increased patience, give it time, buy some seeds and renovate, aerating, fertilization, weed control. Why not pay attention to plant height while including everything above? Yep, some of you might not, there's not really like perfectly correct answer on these questions because some of you may prefer not to renovate but keep going, depending on the condition of degrees of overgrazing. Overgrazed pasture, this can vary, the answer can vary. Next question. This might be a little bit tricky, but proper management of grasses will protect and maintain apical meristems, increase leaf area, increase sugars and carbohydrates, increase root biomass, all of the above, none of the above. Good, thank you. Nice. Everybody got it right. Um, they are all important. We will talk about this more in next coming slides. And I believe this is the last question. Let's go back to your elementary school. I think is the first time we learned about photosynthesis. And what is photosynthesis? A, I don't remember. B, beat me. And C, lights plus water plus carbon dioxide produces carbohydrates and oxygen. Good, good deal. You all got it right. You remembered. So that's very important concept that we already learned when we are like what 12 or 13 years old. We learned the most important thing in pasture and rangeland management. So this is the overgrazing, and this is the sin of the all sins. Overgrazing, when you talk about it, and many people may have a misunderstanding of the concept, but overgrazing is not about how many animals you have in your pasture or how many acres of pasture rangeland you have. It's more like a matter of time, how long time you have the animal in certain area of your grasses. And we all know that if we put too much pressure on your grasses, then you will decrease the forage productivity and persistence. But why is that? Why do we decrease the forage productivity and persistence? That comes into the root system that we're gonna talk more about that in a few slides. And we will waste the water and fertilizer because of the root system that we will damage by doing the overgrazing management. And if you reduce the forage productivity and reduce also the forage quality because of some reasons, then of course we will lose some of those animal gains and milk productions and some animal performance and health. That's going to be negatively impacted by as a result of overgrazing. And when you have overgrazed pasture rangeland, you have more bare grounds, open grounds that was not filled by your grasses, and that will be susceptible to water and wind erosion. And of course, weed and brush is gonna jump into the bare ground and start increasing their population. So that's really bad because we all know that the controlling weed or brush is really hard, difficult. At the end, under such very negative overgrazed condition, then what if drought comes? We are in the partially on a drought condition throughout the Texas. We do not get rain for a long time, maybe just a little bit of rain, and it really hurts your pasture and rangeland if you don't have enough root system developed under the ground, and you may end up losing your pasture and rangeland because it's just hard to recover from the dryness. Will this bare soil permit weed seeds to a place to germinate? Yes. Um, bare ground is a nice place for weed seed to start germinating, and likely the weed population will be more competitive against your desirable grasses. This is the result of um, shallow root system and decreased water infiltration, because if we do not have enough root system developed under the ground, then the water tend to stay on the top of the pasture or rangeland and keeps the water on above ground and ponding, and that will run your soils away, and we might lose the topsoils as a result of water erosion. It can it get worse than this? And yes, we can actually lose the pasture or rangeland. This is an irrigated field, but as a result of overgrazed management, I guess, they lost their pasture, even in the irrigated field. And of course, we care about decreased forage productivity or animal gains and forage quality, or increased weed population in your pasture. That they are all the visible factors, but there are invisible things that we don't see happening behind your overgrazed pasture. If you think about the changing the root system, rooting dynamics underneath your ground, underneath your pasture rangeland, and by changing the root system, your soil microorganisms and soil physical and chemical characteristics gonna be hugely changed, because the roots are constantly dying and producing new leaves, new roots, and then dying again to shed the roots into the soil. Those that shed roots are the good food resources for the soil organisms, so that they can survive and increase their populations, and then they contribute to nutrient recycling. That's going to be good for your grasses again. But if you don't have enough root system, that doesn't happen as often as you have a good vigorous root system. And of course, reducing the soil microorganisms will affect the nutrient cycle and the water cycles as well. And when you have nice good cover on the ground versus bare ground, of course you can see that the temperature changes. Temperature gets higher in the summertime and very lower in the winter time, and the fluctuation is going to be high as compared to having the nice good cover with your pasture grasses or rangeland grasses. And when you have such a huge fluctuation, that's going to hurt your root system as well as the microorganisms. So that's the negative spiral of having this overgrazed, overgrazed pasture. And to understand that how the overgrazed pasture is bad, and also to avoid that overgrazing situation, it is very important that we become a plant scientist. And I always um, talk to the farmers around my region, rolling plains or rangeland owners. I treat them like a scientist because they constantly experiment within their property, what to do, what not to do, to make a better management system. But now I ask you to be a plant scientist, not just to become a scientist, but a plant scientist, so that you can understand how plants grow and what plants really need, what kind of help they need from you in your pasture or rangeland. And for that, I'll start from introducing some of parts of grass plants. You of course all know that the leaves. leaves are one of those most important part of grass, of course, because leaves is the most portable part as compared to rest of other parts of grasses, and consists of braid, sheaths, and sheaths are separated by color. Leaves are the factory of the sugar that I'll introduce a little bit more in detail in next few slides, but the leaves are sugar factory. And the nodes are the bump you have on the stem. It's jointing the stem. And internodes is the part of the stem between two nodes are called the internodes. So nodes and internodes makes up the tillers. And that small fiber consists of more fibers and less protein and sugars as compared to leaves. But they contains the buds or meristems, and that has several different type of meristems, or you can also call this as a growing points. And that's a really important part of the grass, because that's a growing point. Um, they makes a lot of new cells and grow new shoots and tillers from the meristems. That's where we want to protect from grazing. And then shoot collection of leaves and stems, and of course roots at the end, underground structure of the plants that anchors the above ground part of grass, and also takes up nutrients and water to support the nutrient translocation throughout the plants, and very important. But the roots cannot generate sugars like leaves does, but they can take up some other micronutrients or macronutrients from the soil. So they all help each other to sustain their biology. So that's our grass that we have to take care of. And again, meristems is the growing points. We have apical meristem, top of a shoot, and intercalary meristem on the base of leaf blade, and axillary buds at the nodes of stem or rhizomes and wasturons, like you see in Bermuda grass. They are all very important, and depending on the type of grasses, those growing points are located in near ground, and some other grasses have those growing points elevated from the ground, so located in above ground site, like 4 to 5 inch above ground, so that it's more susceptible to the grazing animals. And I just listed this native grass versus improved grass, but more likely it's more like bunch type grasses versus sod forming grasses. So bunch type grasses you see a lot among the native grasses, and sod forming grasses kind of like a Bermuda grass. But the bunch type grasses they are considered to be less tolerant to grazing. Why? Because their apical meristem or growing points are on the 4 to 5 inch, uh, the bottom 4 to 5 inch of the stem. So if the cow get to that point, then they'll drastically slow down their growth, and we don't want to do that. That's why we call it less tolerant to heavy grazing, because of the location of growing points. And sod forming grasses like improved grasses like Bermuda grass, their apical meristem or growing points are on the base of the plants and close to the ground. So that's why it's considered to be more tolerant to the grazing. That's the kind of differences. And we will talk about stubble height management, because this might be the most important thing, and maybe most easiest thing to do to avoid the overgrazing situation on your grass management. But before we talk about specific inches of the stubble height, I would like to review the photosynthesis that we had in the first last questions in the first slide. We need to review this how photosynthesis work within a plant, so that we have better understanding of how to manage the stubble height of your grasses and grasses in your pasture rangeland. So the photosynthesis is the process by which leaves take in carbon dioxide from the air through the openings called the stomata. Stomata is located in the lower side of your leaf, and they takes up the carbon dioxide from the stomata and bring that into chlorophyll, which is located within the grass leaves, um, and captures light energy from the sun and split the carbon dioxide and water and recombines the carbon into sugars. So you need the sunlight and you need CO2 and you need the water to create the sugar. Very simple. And that the first product is a glucose and made out of like carbons. And they have multiple other chemical reactions to produce sucrose and fructose and all the fun stuff. That's basically sugar. So during this presentation, I'll call this end product of photosynthesis as sugar. Use the Hershey Kisses because it's very good stuff. And Hershey Kisses in our presentation, during this presentations, is the end product of photosynthesis. Okay. Again, we have sunlight, water, and CO2 to produce sugars on the leaves. And what's going to happen to those sugars after they produce sugars on the leaves? They will move into sink tissues, which is roots and stems. So because leaves are producing sugars, we call these leaves as a source tissue. And since roots are the place where sugars are moving toward, so the roots are called a sink tissue. And sugars are moving into the root system so that they can grow more roots. And now you have more root system by getting the sugars from the leaves, and that more roots can take up more nutrients and water. And once they take up more nutrients and more water, they're gonna transfer back that good stuff to the leaves so they can produce more leaves. That's why we call leaves grow leaves, because leaves need to produce sugars to produce roots to get the good stuff back to the leaves. So that's how it works on a nutrient cycle throughout the plant body. Now we are gonna look at the more specifics on stubble height management. So when we start in the spring, some of you may be in the southern Texas now. The part of my region, the rolling plains, the northern part of Texas, and Bermuda grass is still in the dormant stage. We didn't have much of rain and stuff, so it might be hurting them a little bit. But when your grasses, rangeland grasses or pasture grasses start getting green up, we're so excited that we can finally put the cows on the pasture. But we have to wait until those green grasses get at least 15-inch height. Why is that? Because if we do not have enough leaves to start, then that may prevent them from developing the enough leaf surfaces to adequately support the growing season or grazing season for the coming year. Because in the beginning of the season, when they are still dormant, the root system needs to support the sugars to grow more leaves. So they are using their sugar reserves to start up. But if you graze it too early, you're hurting their root system sugar reserves too much, and they do not have enough savings in their sugar reserves in the root. So that's why we need to give them a little time so that they can start generating more sugars by having more leaves. That's why we say let's wait until they get to about 15 inches. And in next few slides, I'm mostly talking about native grasses, not the improved grasses, because improved grasses are a little more tolerant to grazing, but the native grasses requires a little bit more close attention on planting height. So again, more leaves, more photosynthesis, more sugars, more uptake of nutrient and water, and more leaves. And that's a very positive cycles. That's why we say it requires at least 15 inches. And this is supposed to be 15. But the violation of 15-inch rule can create this spotted pasture. You might be familiar with this type of pasture, having the open spots, bare ground, weed infestation increasing, and that's a negative cycles. Now it goes to later spring or early summer. Then now warm season grasses have most productive time. We want to maintain the grass height at least minimum height of 12 inch throughout the growing season before fall. Why? Because we need to send the sugars to create more leaves, but we also need the sugars to send back to the root system so that root can constantly grow to have enough healthy root system, especially in Texas. We are susceptible to drought. Dryness can come anytime throughout year, or even now, since last year it's been very, very dry. To avoid having too much damage from drought, we need to maintain our root system, their root systems in grasses. To do that, at least 12 inch of stubble height are required to have a good sugar reserve, save a good sugar reserves in the root and lower stem part. And also need to have intact growing points. We don't want to hurt the growing points. That's why we want to keep at least 12-inch stubble height. But we don't want to get too tall grasses as well, because when grasses get too tall, let's say above 20 inch or 30 inch even, then that grasses gets a little bit stemmy and then have more fibers, less proteins and sugars, and so it's not really high quality forage for your animals. So we also want to maintain the height between 15 to 20 inch to have more productive, nice leafy materials for your animals. And this is the growth stage, general growth stage of grass. So we will start from stage 1. They will start kind of slow because in the beginning they don't have enough leaves. And so they will use up some sugars from the root or lower stems to generate the leaves. Once they have 4 to 5 leaves, then they can start having more sugar generation. Sugar factory is going to get going, and then they can enhance their leaf production really fast. But once they get more and more leaves, then they'll going into the reproductive stage and start having the seed heads and all that. Then the sugar is gonna go into more like toward the seed production, so that total biomass is not gonna be increased, but kind of like uh, become become like always the same amount. But it's gonna start slow and go fast, and then become kind of like stabilized toward the reproductive stage. That's how grass grows. Under the right defoliation condition, you have this slower part is kind of short and going to the enhanced, and then you clip it, and you have enough stubble height so that regrowth is gonna be fast grow and creep it. And we kind of cycle this over the growing seasons. But when you have severely defoliated condition, then your slow growth part gets longer, and then you have regrowth, and then you defoliated too much. You don't have enough sugars left, and you have longer period of this slow growing time period, and then go up that. So you might think that you're taking more leaves out of your pastures or rangeland by taking more grasses down close to the ground, but over the growing season, you actually have a lot less forage materials taken away from your pasture rangeland by defoliating severely. And I'd like to show you some example in the photos. So this is the orchard grass, which is cool season grasses. We don't use cool season grass as much in our part of country, but I just like to use as an example, and the principle would be the same. So this part on the left side was managed continuously grazing or clipped at 1 inch height, and this was clipped every 3 or 4 weeks and then left at 3.5-inch stubble height. And then this is day 1 after the clipping. And I'll show you day 2. You see the regrowth is much faster on this right side pot as compared to left side pots. And day 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this is, if you consider this as one pot, it might not be much of differences. But if you imagine that this gonna occupy all your pasture compared to this guy, of course we wanna have this guy, and you are harvesting more biomass quicker. That's why the longer stubble height is necessary to have actually more biomass. And now we're gonna go into the fall before grass is going into dormancy. The recommendation is stop grazing 6 weeks before the first frost. Maintain at least 15 to 18 inch before they go into winter period. Why? Because in the winter time, pasture rangeland looks like they're dead, but they are not dead. They are actually actively metabolizing their carbon sugars under the ground. So that for that purpose, we need the sugars and the carbohydrates reserves in the root system or lower part of stems for their winter survival. If you don't have enough reserves, sugar reserves in the lower stems or roots, and exceptional cold winter hits you, that might hurt them so much because they don't have enough sugar reserves. And also, how you manage your grasses in the fall or before they go into dormancy is going to be directly influence how much forage you have in the spring. So I put this gas gauge that you see in the speedometer. This is almost empty, and I wouldn't want to drive my car or truck with this. I'll get stressed out. And if you cut too short and let it go to winter, that means you are giving your grasses this low empty gas before they go into the winter, and that's really stressful. And they need to start their spring having this little gas or sugars in their case, and their spring green up is gonna be slower, and their root system is gonna hurt. So that's why we need to maintain at least 15 to 18 inch during the dormancy period. And that will affect the root system. I repeatedly said that, and I want to show you some examples. in next few slides. So this is a demonstration study conducted in Colorado, and they kind of fenced out some portion of grass and gave them 6 weeks of protection from grazing. And they prepared several other cages, but I'm showing only two extremes. So that was 6 weeks protection, and this was 1 week of protection and 5 weeks of grazing. And at the end of this experiment, they dug the soil and compared their root systems underneath. And they found just a little bit of this root system on the one with only 1 week of protection, and a lot more nicer root system on the grass with 6 weeks of protection, so that when they rest enough, they can recover from the overgrazed condition as well. And especially if you look at this white nice roots, that's the new root that's gonna support your shoot growth, tiller growth. That's more sugars contained. Um, and if you kind of try to dig your uh, rangeland or pasture in the spring, even in the fall, and see these nice white roots coming out from your grasses, that means your grasses are producing root nicely. And if you don't see these nice white roots, that means your grasses need a little bit of rest, because sugars are all utilized to the leaf production but not going into the root production. That's why you don't see the white roots. So I would kind of try to dig the soil and see how white roots are going in your pasture or rangeland if you have a chance. Another example in the photo, this was cut to 2 inch every week, cut to 2 inch every 2 weeks, and cut to 2 inch every 4 weeks, and got a lot more the root biomass. And please don't pay attention to this 2 inch part because this is experiment. But our recommendation was 15 inch to start in the spring, and at least 12 inch maintenance height during the growing season, and 15 to 18 inch before going into the fall. Okay, so how, this is a very old picture, but this is a very famous study that was conducted, how defoliation and the root growth, they are connected to each other. But so this table is showing 10% of leaf removed versus 90% of leaf removal associated with the root growth stoppage. So that means if you take only 10% out of your grasses, then you still have root growth going on. Up to 50%, if you remove 50% of your leafy biomass, then root growth start stopping about 2 to 4%. And if you remove 90% of leaf volume, then you basically completely stop the root growth. That's what it comes, the take half, leave half principle comes from. But I'll agree half on that principle, but I don't agree the half, because if you have, let's say, 30-inch height plants, take half would leave about 15-inch. That might be okay. But if you have 10-inch plants, take half will be leaving about 5-inch in the ground. That's not enough. So I would leave enough stubble height and check on the height instead of take 50% of all plant material. Of course, it's gonna be depending on your grasses. Is it bunch type grasses or sort forming grasses? But that'll give them enough, give your grasses enough sugar reserves to start going and also produce more root biomass. This is another figure associating the leaf growth on the sugar reserves. So this is solid line is a carbohydrate, but we call this as a sugar, of course. During our presentation, Hershey Kisses is our end product of photosynthesis. So And dash line is the harvest yield or biomass. When the plants are coming from two-leaf stage to four-leaf stage, of course, that plants that do not have enough leaves to produce enough sugars because they got only two or four leaves. Then to produce two leaves from two leaves to four leaves, they will need help from sugar reserves. That's why this solid line is decreasing, because the plants are utilizing the sugar reserves to produce additional leaves. And now from four leaves to bud stage, sugar reserves are actually gradually increasing even though the leaves are increasing, because you got enough leaves so that you have more sugar productions, a lot more Hershey kisses to support their leaf production as well as increasing saving account. That's why these sugars are increasing in their root system and lower stem part. And you clip it. And again, you need to use your sugar reserves to make it to about four leaves. After about four leaves, your sugar reserves start increasing because you have enough um, leaves to send additional sugars to the saving account. That's how this figure is illustrating and really nicely describing how defoliation and sugar reserves are associated with each other. When I was in grad school in Washington State, that was in 2011, my advisor Steve Franson, forage state specialist, had the opportunity to visit the Northern California farms because they had a very bad drought in 2011, and many pastures in that part of California kind of was dead. All those green colors are weed, and many people lost their pastures, and that's partially because their root system was not healthy before the drought hit. It might be too heavy drought so that they could lose regardless of root biomass, but I would believe that if we take care of our root system, we can increase the chance of surviving drought. So healthy root system will save you from drought, especially in the native grasses. They are famous for producing so much root biomass, and they will produce more root biomass than above ground biomass. If you look at the tough grass, because we are constantly cutting the above ground biomass, so they don't produce as much root. But if we maintain our native grasses, they will help you through the drought. And if we got the drought forecast, but even if we do not have forecast, I would consider maintaining a root system for healthier pasture and rangeland. But if we got the forecast, I would reduce the stocking rate and pay extra attention to the stubble height, plant height, to keep enough sugars so that they can keep going, maintain themselves. And I would take some soil test and then find out what kind of nutrients they might require to maintain the proper management, proper health of the grasses. And of course, dig the plants and check the root system. If root is growing, you'll have white, nice roots. But if roots are not growing, you don't see nice white roots in the spring or fall. And one of those things that I kind of recommend to landowners and producers to do is to use this soil website. It's called the soil web. This is available from UC Davis, University of California Davis, and NRCS. They created to the user-friendly soil survey website. If you just type soil web in a Google search or Yahoo search, you can get to this website, and you can just type there your farm location, and you'll find out about your soil series. and what kind of grasses, what kind of soil you have in your pasture or rangeland. Understanding your soil would help you do better management on your grass and pasture. And another thing is a web soil survey. This is an online tool of the big thick county file that we used to have in the county's office, but now it's all in the website. You can just click the start button, and um, it might be a little bit tricky in the beginning, but if you play around enough, you get to this point. If you don't know how to use this site, I can always help you through. So, but you can also get the estimated forage productivity in of your pasture or rangeland, like this. This shows 1,800 pounds per acre is available in somewhere around here, ABA, maybe yellow color. So that's how you can kind of estimate the forage availability in your pasture or rangeland. And of course, this is old method, but I'll still use it in my research. Clip method, clip and dry, and estimate how much forage you have. That will help you a lot to adjust your stocking rate, because there's no set number of stocking rate per acre. This will all depending on how much forage you have, so that you can properly adjust your stocking rate. Again, balancing the forage supply and animal demand is important. If animal demands exceed forage supply, then it's a result of overgrazing condition, and we do not wanna have overgrazing condition. We want to avoid this condition. Just quickly, I'm an agronomist and not really animal scientist, but this I thought it's helpful to know how much forage average animal consume. But if you have 1,000 pounds of cow, they'll consume about 26 pounds a day of forage. So if you convert that to 1 month, then they will roughly consume 800 pounds per month, about amount of forage. So if you clip and dry your forage from your field and find out how much forage you have, and you can adjust that amount of forage by how many animals you have. If you exceed that amount of forage they consume compared to the amount of forage you have in your field, that's the overgrazing condition. And that was my last slides, but next 3 slides I have recommended readings for you. I found that many producers and landowners that I talk to are very hardworking people, and they always ask me if there are any good readings they can do. They all use internet or they use hard copy of books, but they really likes to read, and I thought I would recommend you all on some of those readings I found very useful. So this first one is kind of old 2002 publication from Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension, but this grass growth and development is a very basic but very useful description on how grasses grow. They introduce what leaves are and stems are, and root system and sugar movement, like I explained during the presentation. Next one is 100 native forage grasses in 11,000 states, include Texas, and that also illustrates 100 different forage native grasses, and also they introduce describe the function of each component of grasses, like leaves and seed heads and stems and stuff like that. And also, if you want to ID your grasses in your native grassland, that will be helpful. This will be helpful publication to read. And this was a newest pub that among the 3 2017 by Dr. Megan Creighton. Many of you probably know her, but this will be very helpful if you are considering renovating your pasture or rangeland and you don't know what to put in and what kind of cost that you might need to have to put those native seeds or improved seed and stuff like that. It's very nicely done and I highly recommend you to read this publication. With that, thank you so much for your time, and I really enjoy talking about the sins of overgrazing. Thank you. Pete?